This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Episode 687, my friends. Today we're going to be talking about psychology and marketing. Now, I went into writing, so I didn't have to do math, right? And then that went out the window. And now I have to do math all the time in marketing. Like, is this up or down? Are people reading this content? Are you all still listening to the shows? You know, I got to look at the 30-day running total, blah, blah, blah. It never ends, right? Numbers didn't go anywhere just because I went into writing or into marketing. And now I have to think about psychology too. And you know, the other thing that bothers me when it comes to psychology and marketing is once you know about it, all the people who try to pull psychology tricks on you in the real world just drives me crazy. Like, don't do this on me. I know what you're trying to do. All of my decisions are completely rational, including inviting Hunter Thurman on the show. He's the president of Alpha-Diver, alpha-diver.com. I'm going to throw it up at the bottom here, and really excited to talk about the topic. What do we have to know? What do we do? And, you know, how do you actually bake it into your day by day as a content creator, thinking about those things? Hunter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Christoph, great to be here.
Blow it up. We didn't break any cameras today, so that's good. Nice to see it. And you know what I got to say? I really like the branding behind you.
Yeah.
That was intentional, I assume.
It was. One of my teammates was like, you know, you're sitting there all the time and it's kind of a missed opportunity. And somebody once, I guess it was a couple of years ago, was like, that's the most realistic looking background I've seen. And I was like, yeah, I'm actually in this room.
Same here. People say that to me too. They're like, is that real? Like, yeah, of course. Look, you know, like, yeah, I have to like prove it that I'm not sitting in front of some green screen.
Yeah, right.
You know, we could go down the green screen rabbit hole for a while, but we're not going to do that. Now, you know, earlier when you posted about today's episode, you were talking about back to the basics. And, you know, when I saw that, I was kind of like, you know, maybe it is the basics, but I also feel like sometimes people forget about it, right? So talk about why is it the basics, and then maybe why do some teams just forget about using psychology in their marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, in the intro, you made an interesting point where you said, you know, it's you can feel manipulated, and I think there's kind of two schools or two states of the art, if you will, when it comes to psychology or behavioral economics, behavioral science, non-conscious measures. All those things tend to get lumped together. One sort of state of the industry is kind of what you're talking about, kind of the nudges space, you know, things like price anchoring, where there's these kind of documented examples where, you know, when they offer yogurt for $1, people buy 3. And when they say 10 for $10, people buy 7. So that's sort of like, and those are valuable, like those are useful, but it's a little bit of like gadgetry. And sometimes it can be misconstrued with, you know, kind of manipulation, sort of, you know, consumer manipulation. The reality is, you know, psychology is so much more powerful than that. It can be used, you know, I guess maybe used for good, used to really help solve problems, to help ease people's decision-making, ease their lives. And that's really, you know, the side of the state of the art that we work within. And so when I talk about getting back to basics, psychology is the foundation of all of our behavior as human beings. And actually, when you look at the history of you know, market research, insights, the marketing apparatus, it's been in pursuit of why people do what they do. It's in pursuit of understanding consumer decisions. The challenge is we humans often don't understand our own psychology. We don't understand why we make decisions. Hence the analogy that you put in the promo for this, that, you know, a lot of market research is sort of like if you walked into the doctor's office and the doctor said, "What's wrong with you?" And you said, "Well, I've got this, and these are my symptoms, and therefore here's my diagnosis." And she goes, "Okay, here's your prescription for it." I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but in reality, when you think about a lot of traditional market research, that's what's going on. Marketers are asking consumers why they do things. They're asking them what they want. They're asking them to explain their own behavior. The research respondent is obliging. They're trying their best. But there is all this non-conscious, I'm going like this because it's back of the brain stuff in our subconscious that we don't have access to. And so when you can tap that and understand it, and psychology and marketing, that's at the core of what it does and what it should do. It's very basic. It's very foundational, and human behavior actually becomes very simple to understand and actually simple to predict.
It's interesting when you talk about some of those things. Is I was thinking about a couple episodes we had. One was confirmation bias in SEO, right? Like people like me would go online and they would upload a picture of themselves and say, "Don't you think this bald head is hot?" Do you know what I mean? And like completely leading, completely biased. So people do that, right? They're like, "Don't you think this power rate is healthy?" You know what I mean? And like you're looking for the answer, and you're kind of trying to get people there.
Yeah.
And then the other one was David Avrin, which was just last week, and he wrote the book on how to be easy to work with. And when you were talking about that, even the time element, right? How much time does it take me to buy a certain drink or to buy a certain product or like, whatever. Like if I want some gum and now I need to go to the store, some specialty store that's completely out of my way, do I
Yeah.
really want that gum? Probably not. But if I can order it online on Hy-Vee.com and they'll bring it to me, as long as I get over $24.95 for an order, my time investment is super low. But how do companies know what's important to the consumer? So time is super important to me. Other people might not care. My wife likes to go to the store, drives her crazy when I say, "Oh, why do you have to order stuff online?" I like going. I'm like, maybe it's okay, but like it's a lot of waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you kind of took the example out of my mouth. It's like, on your time example, there are some brands and some consumers where an exclusive gum that you have to go to a weird store to get actually makes it valuable. So the key is to understand that all roads don't, currently the big debate, and if anybody is connected with me on LinkedIn, I'm constantly ranting about the big debate is price, inflationary pricing. Everybody's got to drop pricing. Marketers make these assumptions sometimes, not even consciously themselves, but this assumption that rational factors are what drive people's decisions, whether drivers or barriers. And something like time or something like the price is something very rational. So the first step in having a more empathetic, a better understanding of why people really do what they do is recognizing that there are a range of reasons that someone does something, and drivers, and a range of barriers. Only one of the drivers, there's four, only one of them is rational. So yes, it may be that you choose gum or you choose something based on rational factors. Oftentimes in traditional research, if you picture a focus group, from the olden days, we always say that's what people think they think. You joked at the beginning of this episode that, yes, all my decisions are rational. You recognize that they're not, but many don't. Many feel like, yes, I can explain why I do what I do. I make rational decisions. But of course, we know, and it's pretty well documented, that there's a great book called Predictably Irrational. Human beings make very emotional decisions, and we don't always make choices that make sense. It's easy to look at categories like luxury, for examples, luxury goods or high-end, clothing, cars, things like that. But even in the packaged goods world, a decision could be rational. It could be very social. It could be very exploratory and experiential, or it can be very impulsive. What's going to make me feel good now? And on the barrier side, oftentimes consumers will cite price. It's getting a lot of manufacturers and retailers in trouble right now because people are saying, I'm buying things that are cheaper. I want things cheaper. It's not untrue, but that may not be their barrier. More often than not, we see that their barriers are time, social barriers. What will people think? Physical, how hard will it be? You touched on that. So in your gum example, you're citing both time and physical barriers. And then we see a lot of emotional barrier, which is just how much will I have to think about it? How hard will this be to figure out? Interestingly, we do this report that we call the Snack 50, where we look at the top 50 snack brands. Oreo suffers from this. Oreo's a brand that is cited as doing a lot of interesting things. It's doing pretty well overall as a brand. But one thing it's done with all these different kinds of Oreos is created emotional costs. It's hard to, believe it or not, it's hard to shop for Oreos. Now, not like tax return hard, but when you're standing at the shelf, that's actually the barrier that shoppers feel. They're like, oh man, I can't just find regular Oreos or whatever I want. So the first step, back to your question, is recognizing that there are these durable set of drivers and barriers, and rarely is the rational or obvious one what's really driving or what's really holding back someone's decision.
What's interesting to me too is when maybe this is social, maybe it's something else, but so one of your reports, probably the Pfft 50,
Uh-huh.
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about liquid death, I think, right? That's
Mhm.
one
Yeah.
of the waters. And I've never even heard of it until I saw it in like some post that was flying by my feet. And then I went to have coffee. I said, "Could I have a water, please?" I just came from the gym and I was meeting somebody, and I was like, and they're like, "We have this water," and I was like, "Oh, I only knew about it because of your report." And then I started looking at it. I was like, "Okay, interesting."
Yeah.
Like the whole message is around, killing your thirst, basically,
Hmm.
which some people might take offense to and other people don't. But how do brands like that even come up? Like, how does that even come up in front of people?
Yeah.
Until I went there, never saw it, never seen it at the store. Of course, I don't even go to the store. But how does it come up? How do they come to the forefront? How do they take advantage of one of these drivers?
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, Liquid Death's a really interesting example in the beverage space, and yes, that is from our Bev 50 report. The insight that they had, and it goes back to the example I just gave. If you ask somebody, how do you pick what water to drink? It's like, that you'd come up with a number of rational points, et cetera. You might, consumers might say things about electrolytes or things, but they don't really even realize in their own behavior that there is a role for them in their life to just look cool. And Liquid Death came on the scene, and it just looked cool. For those that don't know, it's this brand of water in a can. They've innovated and expanded, and there's some new product offerings coming out even as we speak. But originally, it was water in a can with like a skull and like death like, almost like cigarette like packaging on it. Really, like, it just has like a total edge to it, and it really resonated with consumers. It drove a lot of interest for a certain profile, of a lot of like younger consumers. So it's like, this looks cool. This isn't like, my parents' bottle of water. There's some edge to it, and it's a great example of where, look, why is there even a water category in general? Why is there a beverage category? It's nothing that we need, it's things that we want. And when you start looking at it through the lens, kind of set aside or at least consider the other things beyond rational, hydration that drive a category like water, that's where the aperture can open up so much. And you can, find these simple but really potent opportunities that play to the psychology, play to the emotion of consumers, and that's really the opportunity that understanding human psychology affords.
What's interesting to me too is how the different factors kind of play together. So, for example, when you're just talking about, I was just waiting to jump in and go, "No, water is important. It should be a category. I love water. I
Mhm.
drink it. I hate it when people bring me tap water at a restaurant. No, I don't want tap water. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I want real water, whether it's Liquid Death or something else. I don't know if I care about that as much necessarily, but I want real water. So, I was drinking LaCroix, and I was drinking on a call or something, and somebody was talking about, it's like, "Oh, I'm drinking LaCroix," and this is, "Oh, like that's cool," or something. And I said,
Mhm.
"Yeah, like 3 years ago," and that's kind of how they said it.
All
And
right.
like the social right feedback
Absolutely.
was, "You're not cool," and I'm like, "Huh? Do I actually? Why am I drinking this? Like, do
Yeah.
I actually care about being cool to them who?" They don't even see what I'm drinking most of the time, right? Unless I
Yeah.
lift it up. And
Yeah.
even you've been drinking, I couldn't even tell you what you're drinking. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what the cup color is, right? I'm not looking at the cup, right, actively. Um, but the emotional for me is I'm drinking it because number one, I like it. Number two, I'm pretty sure it has a connection to my childhood growing up in Europe, right? Where like bubbly water or whatever, sparkly
With
water is
gas.
way, right? It's way more common.
Mhm.
And so like, why? I don't even care that somebody says, oh, that was cool 3 years ago, whatever.
You,
Like,
you cared enough that you remembered it and you brought it up in this podcast. You cared a little bit, like it's one of those things that you kind of go, shit, I don't know if I care. Do I care? It's one of those moments that kind of makes you reflect on your own decision making.
so it does, right? So like, I mean, we talked about it for 2 minutes already. So maybe I cared. Maybe they got me for a little bit, and now I keep using it as an example. But how do these different drivers kind of like top each other? I mean, is it truly like a personal thing, or like, what kind of trends are you seeing when it comes to that?
Yeah, so there's two things at play. I mean, look, if you think about psychology and consumer behavior and all that, there's a really simple analogy, really simple truth that explains all of it. The carrot and the stick. Picture, a carrot on a string at the end of a stick. The old analogy. We will always seek the carrot and we will always avoid the stick. Marketers' jobs is to understand what will sweeten the carrot and what will shorten the stick. And as I said a minute ago, from psychology, there are these four ways to sweeten the carrot, 5 ways to shorten the stick. So you can sweeten the carrot with more facts and figures and rational. You can make it more socially relevant. You can improve the experience and the sensory, or you can make it look cooler, right? The stick, you can lower the price. As I said, a lot are falling prey to that now. And there's 4 other ways to shorten the stick: time, social, physical, and emotional. The trick is, what is it for your audience that will most sweeten the carrot and most shorten the stick to A, drive your business, and B, do so in a really competitive and margin accretive way. I mean, the last stick shortening anybody wants is lowering the price. And yet for the last, at least 6 months, it's, C-suites are vulnerable to it. Every headline is about like price reduction and price stealing. So it does matter for a given audience. What you'll find, and when you talk about trends, there'll be a portion of the audience that has a profile that's driven by one of those drivers primarily relative to your category, and that's hindered by one of the other things. So, Christoph, you may fit into a gum segment that has high time and physical barriers. You don't want to have to mess with it. And you probably then have you definitely do have a related driver. It may be that you want refreshment and teeth whitening and rational things. It may be that you enjoy sharing gum with your family and it's really social. It may be that you like the experience and it helps you relax. Or there may be a bit of status to gum. Gum's fallen on hard times, but not so long ago, Wrigley introduced a brand called Pfft gum. It was part of my career, and it was like a total status symbol. It was like this cool gum. Point is, you'll have a profile. Other people will have a profile, and it's a really excellent way to segment a marketplace. That's what we do in most of our work. With that, however, there are these macro forces. So there are these, of those 4 drivers, one of them will be the most prominent just in society. It doesn't mean it makes every decision, but it's like the emotional weather. It's like the backdrop. And what we've seen, so we've built this database that goes back to 2018 and fortunately pre-COVID, and what we've seen since COVID, so the last few years, is this really meteoric increase of this driver. We call it impulse, but what it relates to is what's going to make me feel the best or look the coolest right now. Very short-term decision making. What we've seen is that just in general, consumers have a little bit of a YOLO mindset because there has been a lot of pressure put on us humans, and there's been this kind of shift of, God, I don't know what's coming tomorrow. I don't know what, horror awaits in the headlines. I'm just going to do what feels good right now. And it's driven a lot of consumption, a lot of behavior. What we'll see over the coming couple of years is that will wane and one of the other drivers will ascend. It gives you, again, not a crystal ball to say this will happen on January 4th, 2026, but it lets us say, look, here's what's going to be influencing consumer behavior. So it's taking that, what we call those macro forces, those longitudinal macro forces, which are pretty blunt, and pairing it with what we see as driving a category. And that's where we can really understand someone's decision making.
You know what's interesting to me too when it comes to like impulse, for example, this is a story for a whole nother day. So maybe I'll do an episode on this one of these days, but all kinds of issues with the US Postal Service for a new place where we're moving to, right? Our new residence. And so I think I need to get a mailbox potentially. And so I was like, I just ordered it. I said, where should I get the mailbox? And the builder said, just get it at Menards. I
Uh-huh.
got the thing at Menards, right? Like it was like, did I really need it? It hasn't even been approved. Like I should have
Uh-huh.
probably waited, like
Uh-huh.
impulse, right?
Yeah.
This one looks this one looks good, Rachel, my wife. Like, what do you think? Yeah, it looks good. So I ordered online and they deliver with DoorDash. So it literally got here like
Yeah.
30 minutes. Like it was like the mailbox emergency apparently.
Hmm.
But it got here so quick, but the actual decision was so like I will probably need it maybe, but it was kind of impulsive, right? So is
Yeah.
technology enabling people to like be more impulsive than in the past, or is that just me because I sit in this chair all day?
I mean, yes, look, and this is anyone that's an Amazon Prime member, it's like, you remember like a few years ago, and it still is a thing, but people would joke about you go into Target for toothpaste and spend $300. And everyone who's ever, that shops at Target goes, oh yeah, like I get that. Everybody who regularly goes on Amazon and listen to any podcast, and here I am doing it. Every podcast will talk about how 2 Amazon packages a day show up at my house. Like everybody gets that like, yes, you get into this, there's zero transactional friction. And so, yes, technology has enabled a lot more impulsive behavior. But one of the things that we find, like in our data, is that people that are really, really like to shop online. So, you sound like you're very e-com forward. You'd rather shop online and kind of get the business of shopping out of the way. And you're citing a lot of things like time and convenience, which, yes, I get it. What we see in our data, though, and what I would be curious your reaction to is people that are like way into e-com, like do it mostly, much more than go to the store like you're describing. They actually do it because they like the exploration that it provides. So the alibi that most people cite is like, oh, it's quick and easy. I don't have to deal with this. But what we see is that there's about a third, I think it's 33% exactly, of shoppers. It's like, I've used the analogy, it's like a little private jet, a little window to the world that's right there, and everything is there to be explored. A lot of websites, a lot of e-com sites serve the very transactional. Type in what you want and we'll fetch it for you. It's a front end of a database. We'll go get it and we'll have it on your doorstep quickly. However, what we see is driving at least a portion of the audience is swiping, scrolling through, looking at things, discovering, sort of surf shopping. And that's actually a big component that drives a lot of behavior. I wonder if that resonates at all with you.
Oh, it certainly does. And it actually drives me crazy sometimes when you don't get any recommendations, right? Like that's what I love about Amazon.
Yeah.
Like I just bought some new clothes, and I'm like, oh, like gives you other recommendations, like try this and try that. And maybe like even some of these things behind me, that thing right there, that was a recommendation. And
Yeah.
like, do I really need it? No, but it looks kind of nice. I think we'll see if I keep it, and if I don't, I can just return it because it's super frictionless.
Yeah.
Um, as always, when you have fun, time flies, or the other way around. Like, really appreciate you coming on the show, Hunter. Like, really quickly, who should reach out to you? Who works with Alpha Diver? And then maybe, what is your prediction? What's the next driver that's going to move to the top of the list?
Yeah, yeah. We work with a lot of manufacturers, CPG companies. Obviously, we use our database and we build custom databases and do a lot of consulting work. So anyone that's in the business of consumer packaged goods, consumer goods, and retail, that's who we work a lot with. I share a ton of stuff on LinkedIn. Which is probably the best way to, sort of passively follow along. We have a lot of stuff on our website, which you've been splashing across the bottom, is another good resource. And in terms of the macro force that's coming along, this feel good now impulse, like look cool, sort of liquid death. I'm not making a prediction on liquid death, but the driver that you described associating with that's going to decline over the coming couple of years. And what's going to increase is this, what we call exploratory or experience. People are going to, in general, not in every decision, but there's going to be this backdrop of wanting to discover new things, explore new experiences. And that's going to drive a lot of behavior, whether in food and beverage, like we've discussed, or in other categories. So that's the big swell that's forming in the ocean over the next couple of years.
Well, I really appreciated this exploratory episode 687, and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show